Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first podcast episode of Comic DNA. Being that this is the first episode, I guess I should explain what it is we do and who we are. This podcast is going to be an examination and discussion of excellent, fantastic comic books that deserve to be examined and discussed. I wouldn't really consider it a review site or a review podcast. We probably won't be talking about that many current ongoing series, but we will be talking about anything that falls under the umbrella of comics, which includes old comics, golden age up to the modern age, indie comics, even some manga probably, just about anything that we love that's worth talking about. My name is Aaron Walther. I'm an independent comic book writer. You can find just about everything I've ever published on my website, newhavencomics.com. I write a superhero webcomic called Zero's Heroes, and I also do a science fiction anthology called Science Hero. And with me today is my partner in this podcast.
That would be me, Luke Thompson-Moritz. I am an aspiring comic book artist/writer. I primarily upload YouTube videos to the channel youtube.com/Levant, and I too am a diehard comic fan. And I feel that there are too many comics that go unnoticed. This is why I'm glad to be part of this podcast.
Oh, definitely. So today, for our very first episode, we are going to be talking about Shazam, the Monster Society of Evil. Written and drawn by Jeff Smith and published by DC Comics. This book stars the character Captain Marvel, the DC Comics Shazam version, not the Marvel Comics version. And I'm sure a lot of comic book readers are probably pretty familiar with the character. DC always kind of keeps him around. But I actually think the character has a really interesting history, which I'll just briefly explain in case anybody isn't completely aware. Captain Marvel first debuted in 1941 in Viz Comics, which was published by Fawcett Comics, and he was, like many superheroes, really riding the success of Superman, which had just exploded. It's almost hard to understand how extremely popular Superman was at the time. It was a new medium, a new whole mythology of characters and types of genre. So it was a really exciting thing, and there was a lot of comic book companies really trying to capitalize on that excitement. And Captain Marvel is one of the characters that came out of that. And Captain Marvel actually was so successful that for a time in the 40s, he was actually outselling Superman. But another interesting development in the character of Captain Marvel is that DC Comics, at the time they were National Comics, they aggressively protected their copyright on the character of Superman. And National Comics was actually in a 12-year-long lawsuit with Fawcett Comics, claiming that Captain Marvel was an infringement of their copyright on Superman. And the lawsuit was kind of a big mess, which I'm not even going to get into, but the long and the short of it is Fawcett agreed to stop publishing the character in a out of court settlement, and they paid DC some money, and that was pretty much the end of the character. And then in the 70s, DC Comics started licensing the character, and they brought him back. And this version of the character was it was in continuity with the original 40s and 50s version. And then, of course, in the 80s, DC did their famous Crisis on Infinite Earths, which tried to restart a lot of their characters and bring them all into the same universe. And I kind of have been under the impression that ever since then, DC Comics has never really known what to do with the character of Captain Marvel. They've done a lot of different versions of him, various starts and restarts, trying to figure out how the character fits into the DC universe, where he fits into the DC universe, and whether or not people even want to read about him at all. But my first exposure to him was in the pretty famous comic book Kingdom Come, and I always kind of liked his depiction, but it wasn't until I started reading a lot of the Golden Age books that I really, really developed a love of the character. He was so unlike like any other superhero really at the time, and obviously so unlike any superhero that was being published currently, both from Crisis up until the present day. Luke, what was your first exposure to the character of Captain Marvel?
My first exposure was various other forms of media that DC had been publishing, random animated movies, the various cartoons that they made for Justice League, Batman the Brave and the Bold, mostly just his television presence. And I knew of him. I didn't think much of him. I kind of just disregarded him. This book was my first huge exposure to Billy Batson, Captain Marvel, the Wizard, every aspect of the IP. And this made me realize I was upset that I had been missing out on this for so long. I always thought, prior to falling in love with Superman in various different forms of media, I always thought Captain Marvel was just another DC character, didn't really matter, so on and so forth.
Yeah, they always kind of kept him just in the background.
Right, and like you were saying, they kept him around, they always tried to keep him around and didn't know what to do with him, and I always felt that in his other appearances that I saw him in, they were just shoehorning him in to fill a spot. You know, he was a seat filler. And then I read this book and realized I couldn't have been more incorrect. There was so many facets of his character that I couldn't believe I hadn't known about before. Growing up, I had always been a big fan of Power Rangers and all of the various the Rangers things, Beetleborgs, so on and so forth. So when I read this Captain Marvel book, I made this association with this whole normal kid transforming into this big heroic hero. And I related. I saw Billy Batson, I saw it was just this normal kid down on his luck, and he turned into a hero, seemingly out of, not nowhere, but he gradually built up to it, and I fell in love. I love this. I just love Captain Marvel. I love Shazam, everything about it.
Yeah, this book really, to me, it really captures the magic. Right. as a little pun there, captures the magic of the character and kind of what makes him really unique compared to the other DC characters.
He almost doesn't even feel like a comic character at some spots. There's certain spots that it just feels more of a, just kind of another. It's hard to explain. There's sometimes he doesn't feel like a comic character, and he just feels like something else entirely. That he's kind of transcending the mold of what a comic character is normally and what it should typically be, and then it just meshes so well back into its comic book roots, and it's so seamless, and it's impressive that it's still going. That it's impressive that they've kept Captain Marvel alive as long as they have. Mm-hmm. That they keep spinning new ideas into this character because they built him so open-ended. He doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be specifically Billy Batson. It doesn't have to be specifically any of these other aspects of it, and it's so marvelous. Let's put it that way. It's so marvelous.
I think one of the things that really stands out about the character, like the original Golden Age depiction of the character, was how perfectly it blended superheroes, which was kids' entertainment, with its audience, with the kids' audience, without just making it the superhero and his sidekick.
Right.
Like, that became the staple, was, Batman and Robin. Robin was one of the first sidekicks, and that became such a well, now everybody has to have a sidekick. And Captain Marvel never really had a sidekick. Now he did expand. They did have the Marvel family,
Right.
where his twin sister Mary Marvel and his friend becomes Captain Marvel Jr. So it kind of looked like sidekicks,
But they were more
but it
of a
really
team.
wasn't, because they were
Yeah.
still like the main characters, and
Right.
they were all stars of their own books. Like Captain Marvel was so successful that they spun that into the Captain Marvel Adventures, the Mary Marvel book, the Captain Marvel Jr. book. Like these were all really strong, characters in their own right, and they really like captured the children's point of view without just making it a bunch of dumb kids characters. Like it was
Right.
still Captain Marvel. He was still a superhero. It was really even more of like an ultimate perfect wishful fantasy than Superman or Batman was, because it was a kid literally becoming, a full adult superhero.
And it's like, I feel like there's so many aspects of this character that really truly encapsulate what comics, I want to say what comics really mean, but what comics really mean to me specifically. They're just supposed to be these adventures that we could never go on ourselves. These storylines that would never ever happen, and we can kind of, we can live them. And there's a lot of comics that try to start blurring the line between what could really happen and what could never really happen. And the Captain Marvel Shazam books, I feel like they don't need to do that. They seem to have always just captured the, you're going to see a man flying through the sky. You're going to see this young boy, saying the magic word and transforming into this superhero. And they always just tried to keep true to that. They always tried to keep true to that mythical, wonderful nature that I feel comics should always just try to encapsulate in one way or another.
Well, I think Captain Marvel specifically as a character just really embraced the magical, mythical nature of superheroes and really kind of helped develop that. Superman has his science fiction pulp roots. It's very everything about Superman, space, alien technology, that's like the style of Superman. And Batman obviously has the gritty pulp
Realistic,
noir. It's all detectives and noir, and that's that style of that book. And Captain Marvel really delivers on just the modern fantasy. It's magic words, it's parallel dimensions, magical beings that exist outside of space and time.
Right.
So they're able to kind of like do all the same stuff that Superman or other superheroes did at the time.
But they don't really need an explanation for it. They can just kind of say,
Well, it's not so much. I don't want to go down the road where it's just like it's magic, so we don't have to explain it, because I don't like that. But it delivers it all in such a digestible way. But anyway, so let's talk a little bit about Jeff Smith.
Yeah.
The book that we're talking about specifically here, Shazam: The Monster Society of Evil, was written and drawn by Jeff Smith. Most comic book fans, you people that are really in tune with the comic book industry, I'm positive that most of you know who Jeff Smith is. If you haven't seen his name in print a lot, you've definitely seen his first long-form comic that he did, Bone. It was really popular as a successful independently published comic, but also it really got embraced by Scholastic, and so a lot of kids, it was their first kind of introduction to comics, I imagine, for a lot of them.
At the very least, their first introduction to a long-running comic series.
Yeah, I should have said that.
Every time they would go to
comics.
a book fair, they would see Bone and say, oh, okay, well, I can spend my money on this. I know that I like this series. Mm-hmm. That was their first exposure to continued print comics, to something to keep up with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my first exposure to Jeff Smith was, I can't even remember, in a comic book shop somewhere, just looking through comics, and I came across Bone. I had heard about it from various people. I've never heard anybody say a bad word about it. It's such an enjoyable comic, but I also think it's the kind of comic where people that wouldn't like it probably wouldn't read it. They wouldn't, they would see the art and just kind of say that it's not for them. Which, because his art style does have I hesitate to use this because it's such a catch-all, but he has like a cartoony style.
Right. When I see his books, that's the image I get for a comic book. Yeah.
But it's very expressive and really, really unique. Like, it really is uniquely Jeff Smith. Like, you can pick anything Jeff Smith draws out of a lineup of other cartoony styles. So I had read Bone a while back, and of course I really loved it. And so when I heard that he was doing this Shazam book, which was his follow-up to Bone, which he had been working on for a couple of years before it finally was published in 2007, I was pretty excited because Bone had been finished. At that point, Bone had been finished for a while, and it had been a few years, so it had a lot of good buzz, as I remember. Obviously Jeff Smith fans were excited for it because Jeff Smith is the man.
And this was his first venture into superhero material, I'm assuming, correct?
Correct. I believe this was his first work for DC or Marvel, if not his only work for DC or Marvel.
All right.
I would have to double check that, and I'm not going to. So I imagine, Luke, your first exposure to Jeff Smith was Bone also?
Correct. When I was growing up in elementary school, my parents would pick me up a comic or two, nothing that I really dove time into. I'd read a Spider-Man comic every now and again. When I was growing up in elementary school, we'd always have the Scholastic Book Fairs, like you were saying. And I knew as soon as I saw Bone that would just be something that would resonate with me for a long time. I always went to the book fairs with other intentions in mind. I'd always see Bone and go, I should get that next time. And I never did. And I always saw the art, and it blew me away. I flipped through the pages. I loved how everything was organized. It was really easy to read. It was very timeless. It might be the correct word here. There was really no age barrier. Like, as I was younger, I could pick it up and it'd be easy to read. And I'd pick it up now and see things that I missed, little pieces of the background that I never caught when I was little, and just...
Oh, absolutely.
It blew my mind, the attention to detail for this. That was another thing that I noticed reading it now, is it, you would be reading it back then and just say, oh, it's just this story about this guy going on an adventure. And now you'd read it and go, there's so much more to this than I ever thought possible. And I never remembered his name. I never knew who he was. I found out about this book through you and the Shazam, the Monster Society of Evil. Found out through this book from you. I read it. The first second I saw the cover, my first thought was, I've seen this somewhere before. I've seen this art style. And like I said, it resonated with me from when I was younger. And then I pieced it together that it was the same person. And this was my first time reading anything from Jeff Smith. And since then, I have started picking up Bone to catch up and read it to make up for lost time.
Bone is great.
Yeah, and this book has made me a Jeff Smith fan. I'm looking for all of his other work that he's done. I'm looking for currently publicized webcomic that he's doing. And
yeah, if you go to Jeff Smith's website, boneville.com, you can read the first issue of his follow-up series, self-published series, Rassle, R-A-S-L. I was buying that when that came out. That's a really good series. Kind of, it's really interesting because, like, it still has an all-inclusive style, approachable, but the storytelling feels a little bit more mature. It feels like he's not, like, trying to write down. Well, but see, that's not fair because I don't think he ever wrote down to anybody in Bone.
The best way I could think to describe it is his comics are growing up with his audience.
Yeah, it's kind of a situation like that. So, yeah, the first issue of Rassel is on Boneville, and you can also read his currently publishing webcomic, Tukey Save the Humans, which is also really cool. Tukey is interesting for me because other than Captain Marvel, his Shazam book, I've read all of his stuff in black and white. I read Bone in black and white. I never read any of the color books, and I was reading Rassel when it was coming out in black and white, and I think he's since released it in color. So, dang that Jeff Smith, because now I got to go buy the color books.
Any way to support Jeff Smith.
That's absolutely. But that was actually one of the things that I was really excited about Captain Marvel, was because Captain Marvel is such a colorful character. So getting to see Jeff Smith's art style in this fully colored comic book was, for me, that was brand new. Because, like I said, I had only read his stuff in black and white.
Right.
Before we get to talking about the book, I just want to briefly kind of go over the story for those of you that haven't read it. Shazam, the Monster Society of Evil is a basic origin story, just kind of a reintroduction to the character. In fact, the origin that Jeff Smith does is almost straight panel for panel origin that originally appeared in Whiz Comics number 2 back in 1941. And he introduces a lot of the regular cast of characters in the Captain Marvel family. We introduce Mary Marvel, Taki Tawny, Dr. Savannah, and of course Mr. Mind, the main villain and the leader of the Monster Society of Evil. So we get Billy's origin, and he becomes Captain Marvel, and inadvertently opens a portal to another dimension, which allows Mr. Mind and all of his various monsters to start coming through, and they're going to start wreaking havoc on Earth. I believe he says he just wants to kill everyone or just eliminate all human life on the planet. So Captain Marvel has to figure out how to stop him, and along the way he has to deal with Dr. Zavanna, who is the head of Homeland Security, and he also meets his sister Mary, who becomes Mary Marvel, and together Captain Marvel, Mary Marvel, and Taki Tawny have to team up and stop Dr. Savannah and Mr. Mind at the same time, and needless to say, that's exactly what they do. So, let's talk a little bit about the book, Shazam, the Monster Society of Evil. Luke, what did you think of it?
Well, just to throw a blanket over this, it was incredible.
Mm-hmm.
I went into this book knowing very little about Shazam, knowing very little about Jeff Smith, just the entire thing. It was almost a new, completely fresh experience for me. I was already blown away by the cover. I, by trade, am a graphic designer, so I noticed little nuances on the cover that just stuck out to me, and they made me interested. I loved the attention to detail on the art. I loved how defined Captain Marvel was, just everything about it. Mm-hmm. So I saw the cover, got instantly roped in, and the art continued to be stellar throughout the entire book. It like you were saying earlier, it perfectly kind of captures this childlike innocence to comics as a whole, and that could be from Jeff Smith's art, that could be from the colors that he chose in specific areas, the backgrounds not seeming like particularly detailed. They're just kind of smooth and easygoing. It's very easy on the eyes. It's not ever too dark or anything. Mm-hmm. The text is very easy to read. So organization, the style, everything is just an A+ throughout the entire story.
I should point out that the colors on Shazam, the Monster Society of Evil, are done by Steve Haymaker. I am sorry, Steve, I don't know how you pronounce your name. But yeah, so when we're talking about how great these colors look on this book, he did an excellent job.
These two worked stellar together.
I think they worked really well together.
Then, the first thing I noticed going into the comic, the first page doesn't waste any time introducing us to Billy Batson. They introduce us to his home situation, that it's very tough, it's hard on him. He is living on his own, trying to survive on his own, and he's not even necessarily a troubled child. He's just in a bad situation, really down on his luck, but it keeps reinforcing in these first few pages specifically and throughout the rest of the story that he's not a bad kid. He's a great child. He's really heroic, and it continues to develop throughout the story.
He's a kid with the heart of a hero.
Right, and then when he meets Tawny on the 8th page, it starts showing a little bit more of the child with the heart of a hero.
Mm-hmm.
Then, as it progresses, it starts introducing the wizard, and I love that the wizard starts off as a mentor to Billy Batson, and as the story progresses, it starts becoming more of a personable, organic relationship between the two, and I love that. It doesn't feel like the wizard is just tacked on specifically to give him his powers.
Mm-hmm.
That he's there to actually add substance to Shazam, to Captain Marvel, to everything. The first transformation to Shazam, it just holds so much weight. Like, it makes it feel that it's not just a thing. Like, it's actually like a moment that if I saw this in real life, I would actually stop and be in shock. Oh, there's another pun, unintentional pun. I would be in awe watching this happen. And this book, I felt, perfectly encapsulated that. Specifically, the first time he transforms, it's very, very. It has a lot of weight to it.
I really love that page. I'm looking at the hardcover book. It's page 29, where the wizard, basically the wizard just jumps right into it. Like Billy gets led to the train, and the wizard's sitting there, and they got the whole situation, the big block ready to drop on him.
Right.
He's got his giant book, and they do the whole thing in like 4 pages, which I really like. But the wizard just explains to him he's perfect as the vessel for Captain Marvel, and then you get that page where the wizard starts just recanting all of the mythological characters that create the Shazam power, and as the panels progress, you start seeing the electricity flying everywhere, and the lettering is really nice. How he keeps getting more frantic and louder. Like this is the kind of thing that like would have blown anything in the Lord of the Rings movies away, just for like the sheer, like you were saying, just the weight of the situation. Billy Batson like hovering in the air, electricity flying everywhere, and this crazy old Gandalf-looking guy just shouting out all these, the Solomon for wisdom, Hercules for strength at him. And then I just love the last panel, and he just like shouts at him, "Say the magic word! Say the magic word!" And
you
Billy
can
says,
notice too in the lettering, when Billy says Shazam, like it's not completely inked in, so it feels kind of like jarry and like that it actually feels like there's some weight behind it, like I was saying.
Yeah, it's really frantic.
Right. As the story progresses more, the burglar, or not the burglar, the other homeless gentleman that approaches Billy in the beginning of the story comes back.
The young guy that's always picking on
Billy. And Billy comes back as Shazam. He's he's ready to end this. He doesn't want to deal with this anymore. I love that whenever he is Shazam and sees this happening, throws the guy out the window, tells him to get out. I love that Captain Marvel actually looks back at the room that Billy is staying in and just says, "This is no way for a kid to live." Like, it starts to build this sort of makeshift partner situation going on between them. And I only say partner just because it's the best way I can think to explain it. But it starts showing them bonding. There's multiple iterations of Shazam, or of Captain Marvel, I'm sorry, that we've been talking about. There's where when Billy transforms, he is still Billy Batson, just in Shazam's body. Or in Captain Marvel's body.
It's funny because you say Shazam. Currently, DC has changed the character's name to Shazam.
Right. So they both work.
They both work. That's probably a different discussion.
Right. We won't get into that now.
Yeah.
And then it starts showing this bond forming between these two a little bit. You can tell that Captain Marvel feels bad for the situation that Billy is in, and that comes into play later. And there's this situation is very unique to how I felt Captain Marvel portrayed, because there's other iterations that it is Captain Marvel and it is Billy Batson, two different people. But this Billy Batson remembers everything that happens that Captain Marvel does. Mm-hmm. And I like that because, like I said, it further strengthens the bond between the two. Mm-hmm. And they show it later when Captain Marvel starts flying through the space-time to go visit the Wizard. And, Billy's riding on his back, and they're just, like, chatting with each other, just like friends. Like, that, something about that really sticks out to me. That they feel very organic.
Yeah. Jeff Smith did a really good job kind of, like, updating the relationship between Billy Batson and Captain Marvel. Like, in the old original comics, they had moments, but for the most part, it was just, here's Billy Batson, and then he changes into Captain Marvel, and then
more or less kind of like a Hulk situation. It's Bruce Banner and there's the Hulk,
and that's kind of a thing that they just kind of glossed over in the old comics because they didn't really need it. It took up space, and the kids didn't care, But
they just wanted to see Captain Marvel.
Yeah, exactly. But I really like the way they built the relationship between Captain Marvel and Billy, as like in this book, in Jeff Smith's book, the way like they both needed each other.
They played off each other's strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, which is really, like I'm saying, that's just an extrapolation, just sort of like building on what the original comics, the original C.C. Beck Fawcett comics were. It's just done really well. I don't know how many times I can keep saying that.
Kind of finds his own niche with this, Like you were saying, the original thing was there's Billy Batson and there's Captain Marvel. That's cut and dry. Mm-hmm. And then in other forms of media, there is Billy Batson is Captain Marvel. Mm-hmm. And my personal preference is I love when Billy Batson is still Captain Marvel, because it presents us with a hero that is so untraditionally inept. Mm-hmm. And it's so funny in certain situations that everyone is all serious, Batman is dark and broody, Superman's all incredibly heroic, and then here comes Captain Marvel. Just no one wants him there because they're like, Billy, just go home. Like, Billy, we got it. And
pure innocence.
He's so unbelievably powerful. Mm-hmm. I always felt that was hilarious, and that's my personal preference for Captain Marvel. So going into this, when I started seeing the relationship that they had, I was very apprehensive at first, the first time I read it. And as it kept developing throughout the book, I realized this is wonderful. This is fantastic. I love how this is, because it's appealing to a certain new niche of Captain Marvel fans. It's introducing a sidekick hero dynamic without there being two people in theory.
Right.
But there is also
like you said, it's a sidekick hero dynamic without a sidekick,
which is incredible.
Which is incredible because, I mean, let's face it, Robin is the punchline to so many jokes, and he's got his fans, and he's a great character. I'm not one of those people who thinks Batman works best without Robin. I think Batman.
Right, I'm the exact same.
I think he works just fine either way.
They play off each other's weaknesses.
Yeah, exactly. And so, Robin is fine, but he's the punchline to so many jokes.
Right. So, following the last couple panels, or the last couple pages of Shazam, or Captain Marvel telling the homeless gentleman to, get out, so on and so forth, the homeless gentleman finds Billy and chases him into the park. This is one of my favorite pages in the entire book. He takes the guy's hot dog. He takes Captain Marvel. Billy Batson comes up and says, "I'd like to buy a hot dog for a friend." Well, it's not for me, it's for my friend. He'll tell you what he wants when he gets here. His name's Captain Marvel. He goes off panel. The bully comes in and takes the hot dog, turns around to eat the hot dog, and runs straight into Captain Marvel. Mm-hmm. I laughed endlessly from the first time I saw this panel. This is your last warning, stay away from me, so on and so forth. Captain Marvel says he's a thief who preys on homeless children. And then, this is my favorite panel in the entire book. and you protect them for hot dogs, the subtle humor that I've been seeing just very sporadically throughout this book, even after this panel, makes it just makes me so relieved. It's such a breath of fresh air from most of the other comics that I read and enjoy. I'm not criticizing other comics for that, but it's just so unique and fresh seeing this, and it just plays into the the Billy Batson child dynamic going on here, and it's wonderful. It's such a good parallel between the two, that Captain Marvel is learning from Billy Batson. He's learning how to kind of be a little more lax in situations, and in the same token, Billy Batson begins to learn how to be more heroic throughout the story. And then also on the same page, or on the next page, they make a funny Superman reference of, let me guess, you're off to find a phone booth to change in. No, I'm off to see the wizard. And a double Wizard of Oz reference.
Yes.
So,
no, that's
clever.
That's
Very
a really
clever.
good... I'll tell you why I love that joke so very much. It perfectly summarizes the tone and style of what Captain Marvel is, and why he is not like Superman. The joke there is, let me guess, you're off to find a phone booth to change in, basically saying you're Superman, right? You're a superhero, that's what Superman does, you're like Superman. And his follow-up is, no, I'm off to see the wizard, which is a reference to the Wizard of Oz, which is probably the most gaudy fantasy magic land ever put onto modern media. So, and it is certainly, if it's not, then it has certainly come to represent that. So that is a really nice, well-placed joke. Just sets you up right there, just to really highlight that, Captain Marvel is a whole world apart from Superman. He's almost got more in common with Wizard of Oz than he does Superman.
Right.
Which I think is one of the selling points of the character.
Right, and it like you were saying, it's what separates him, and that's what makes him so likable, is that there's so much more to him than just something that is a little bit aesthetically similar to Superman. They
Right.
both are these well-toned, muscly heroes that are in full-body suits.
Well, to be fair, Captain Marvel was created with the intention of riding the coattails of Superman.
Right.
I mean, there's no... it's not like they had some noble creation that they were getting screwed out of. They, the guys at Fawcett Comics said, Superman is successful, we need our own Superman. And there were similarities. The alter ego, in this case Billy Batson, Clark Kent, they're both news reporters, journalists in some fashion.
Right. Which has been, further stretched out since, but like you were saying, during his original conception.
Mm-hmm. I don't think DC Comics, then National, I don't think they were out of line in saying, you're just trying to copy us and write our coattails, because they were. But I do think that Fawcett Comics created a character that, while obviously inspired by the success of Superman, certainly is unique enough to stand on his own.
Right.
Yeah, I think it should be stated, too, that I think it's tough to say whether or not Fawcett would have eventually won the case, because they eventually just, as I said earlier, settled out of court, and that partially had to do with the fact that by the 50s, superhero comics had really trickled. They were selling half of the amount of issues they were selling just 10 years earlier during World War II at its peak. So they were kind of...
losing steam.
Yeah, they were losing steam, and they were... obviously, if the books aren't selling, obviously somebody made the decision that it's not even worth the legal battle anymore. We're just
losing
call
too
it
much
quits.
money, not making enough money in the long run. So, after the couple panels of hot dogs, the Captain Marvel takes off to go visit the wizard at the Rock of Eternity. So this is what I was talking about earlier with the partner dynamic without there being two people. You see Billy Batson show up on Shazam's back, or show up on Captain Marvel's back, and they start having a little bit of chatter with one another, and you can just tell that Billy Batson is still kind of taking it all in, and
Mm-hmm.
it's still just showing him develop as, learning how to do these things. And when he gets to the Rock of Eternity, is another one of my favorite panels in the entire comic. They go to visit the wizard, and they summon the wizard. They talk to him. The wizard actually wants to know, how are you, Billy Batson? I've had a pretty crazy week, sir. You can tell that he's still not used to all of this. He's
overwhelmed.
Yeah, he's very overwhelmed. He's a kid, And Shazam and Captain Marvel confronts the wizard to shine light on Billy's situation of how bad his living conditions are. Like Captain Marvel said earlier, this is no place for a kid to live. And you can start seeing that Captain Marvel truly cares about the vessel that he's in, specifically Billy Batson. I can't comment on any of the other specific situations, but this specifically, the Captain Marvel Billy Batson dynamic, in this book, you can tell that he cares. He wants Billy Batson to do better.
I mean, at this point, Captain Marvel is becoming Billy's father figure.
Essentially.
He's an orphan, so it's just kind of fulfilling that metaphor.
And they even played on that earlier about how much Billy wanted a father figure when he ran to the subway when he thought he saw his father.
His dad, exactly.
And you can tell
he thought his dad. Yeah.
In a certain panel on the page that he comes to visit the wizard, he says, "I can take care of myself. I don't need a family. I told the lady from the shelter I don't want a family." You can tell that there's hurt there. You can tell that he's abandoned,
Yeah.
Or he feels abandoned. From what I remember, both of his parents passed away.
Yes.
And he feels abandoned. He feels like they left before they even got a chance to know each other. So Captain Marvel's becoming this father figure.
Well, the father figure is kind of a staple of the sidekick hero relationship. I mean, Bruce Wayne is a father figure to
the various Robins.
I was gonna say Tim Drake, but Robin fans are gonna be pissed off at me.
That's all right.
For not remembering Dick Grayson's name, but I mean, Bruce Wayne is father figure to all the Robins, really.
Especially Dick Grayson.
Specifically Damian, who is his actual son. Oh, snap.
Yes. Oh, snap, plot twist.
But yeah, so that's that's just the traditional relationship between those characters. But again, going back to what makes Captain Marvel so unique is that it's able to do that father figure relationship and kind of get all of those metaphors in there without it actually being a sidekick. It's that each character is the main character.
This is coming back into what is my other favorite panel of the comic, when the wizard tells him you have a baby sister. He is blown away by this. Like, just in the previous panel, he says, "I don't need a family. I don't want a family." And when he finds out that he has a sister, you can, the first panel it shows it says he looks surprised. He is surprised. I'm surprised. I wonder where she is. He looks so close to crying, and you feel you feel for him. You feel like this is a real child that just found out. You've been an orphan your whole life. I'm telling you, you have a family. You have a family that you don't know about.
Well, the whole superhero family, that again, that's a trope among a lot of the Golden Age comics. But again, with Captain Marvel, it just works so much better.
It does,
because all the characters,
they all feel so great around each other.
Well, and they're literally family.
Yeah.
You have the Bat family. And, you have Batman as the head of the family, and then, the Robins,
the various Robins,
the Batgirls, and whatever.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, the Bat family is at odds with how people want to present Batman.
Right.
I mean, if you just look at the movies, you look at Dark Knight versus Batman and Robin, which is the movie where they introduced the Bat family by having Batgirl and Robin. And everybody said that Batman and Robin is terrible. Those characters don't need to be there. Obviously, everybody liked Dark Knight. Just Batman fighting the Joker, and that's that.
That appealed to the crowd that felt that Batman.
Those are the people. Those are the people that really want to see Batman like that. But with Captain Marvel, you cannot separate the Marvel family from the character. The family aspect is like the main theme. It's certainly the main theme of Jeff Smith's book.
Oh yes,
like
of
that's
course.
the whole. Like I said, Billy is the main character. That's the other thing I really like about Jeff's book, is that Billy Batson truly is the main character.
Correct.
And Captain Marvel is this father figure to him, and he's got his sister Mary Marvel. He's got Shazam, which is like his grandfather, and he's even got Talkie Tawny, which kind of becomes like his uncle,
The cool
older
uncle
brother
that lets him do stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the cool uncle that lets him stay up late and watch HBO.
Right.
So like, family is like the most important theme, I think, to Captain Marvel. It's really and that's what makes it like so easy to make like all accessible, all ages stories from
Right.
this, because obviously that's a theme that's important to kids. But let's be honest, that's important to everybody. You
It
may
is.
not always
Yeah.
want to watch. You may not always want to read a book about family, but like I think
This
I
makes
think
you want to read a
Pixar-
book about family.
Exactly. Well, I think Pixar has proven that anybody will go see a movie about family, because that's what all of their big hit movies are about. It's about family and friendship,
Right.
and how important these connections are. And so Captain Marvel just falls right in line with that. And like I said, it is completely just like grafted to the core of the book concept. Like I said, you can't have Captain Marvel without this theme of family and friendship, which I think, like I said, that's another thing that makes it stand out, because Batman, you can have those themes in there, but it's not essential to
It's
the
not a
character of
staple.
Batman. Right, exactly. You can do Batman. Obviously, Batman is about family because he lost his mom and his dad, but it's there are family themes to a lot of superhero books. Superman, again.
Ma and Pa Kent.
Exactly. Ma and Pa Kent are essential to the character of Superman.
Correct.
Batman, the death of his parents obviously are essential.
Turned him into Batman.
Turned him into Batman. Even Spider-Man, Uncle Ben. That
Uncle
is
Ben
what
died and Spider-Man turned into a wrestler.
a hero. Yeah, turned into a wrestler. Right, a world famous wrestler.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, you could even extend it to the X-Men, like a lot of the
Xavier's
underlying.
school,
Yeah, it's
family.
they all find
feel
a
like
family.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So family. I don't want to maybe lavish too much praise on Captain Marvel, because it is a
Reoccurring theme.
well, it's a main theme for a lot of superhero books. Definitely a main theme for a lot of American fiction.
Right.
But again, like it's done in Captain Marvel in such a way that the book almost has to be about family all the time.
Right.
Like that is what the characters are.
So as it continues, I love what continues to happen when he wakes up in his house. All of the alligators are running around outside, the alligator people.
Mm-hmm.
And I love when he transforms into Shazam,
Mm-hmm.
and they say, "Shall we play with him first? It's always more fun." He Shazams out, hits him. I love this panel so much. The alligator tries to bite him, and his head is just in the alligator's mouth, and he's sitting there completely oblivious. I love that so much.
That's a common gag in a lot of the old Captain Marvels. Like whenever Billy Batson would turn into Captain Marvel, like one of the things he would do, I always liked in the old comics, the way he would fight criminals. He would turn into Captain Marvel and then just stand there while they tried to kill him,
And
then
then themselves out.
and then they were amazed that it didn't work.
Right. They were just, how did you withstand?
Yeah.
How did you
So
withstand it?
there's this panel specifically of the alligator biting his head. There's
And all his teeth are breaking out.
there's a specific panel in the old original Monster Society of Evil comic that was serialized in the 40s of basically the same thing, where there's a crocodile person and Billy Batson turns into Captain Marvel, and the crocodile person just attacks him and tries to bite him, and all his teeth break off, and And Captain Marvel says some corny line, but
Right.
yeah, there's a lot of that in this.
He doesn't even need to say anything in this panel. There's so much onomatopoeia.
Yeah.
It's all right.
The snap, crunch,
Right.
grind, crunch.
Obviously, that was great. That was fun. It continues, and he finally meets he goes to the circus and finally finds his sister. He finds his sister at the circus. And, another note that's worth noting. When Sylvana is trying to get up on the podium to talk into the microphone, he says,
That's a good joke.
Yeah, I'm sorry, sir. Do you need help? Give me a box to stand on, you fool. It felt to me, Sylvana right there. They made him seem like a Lex Luthor-ish character with little man syndrome, where he's ready to just spar. Like he's I need a box, but if you don't get it from me, I'm going to punch you in the mouth.
That's actually something I wanted to talk about. What I really like, not all of Captain Marvel's villains were like this, but Jeff Smith, I don't know if he did it consciously, probably, but or I don't know if C.C. Beck did it consciously, but Captain Marvel's two greatest villains, definitely his two most recurring, most notable is Dr. Sivana and Mr. Mind, who is the main villain of Shazam, the Monster Society of Evil. And what's really interesting about those two characters is that they're both really, really tiny. Dr. Sivana is depicted as like a short, almost a little person. Like he's literally the same size as Billy Batson. A little bigger. Obviously, he's got his huge head, but he's a small person. And like you said, he has short man syndrome. He is constantly, he's angry. He's overcompensating for his lack of height. He's an evil genius who's proud of how evil he is. And then the other main villain, of course, is Mr. Mind, who is, as it is revealed in, later on, Mr. Mind is a tiny little caterpillar. In Jeff Smith's book, he kind of draws him more like a snake, but
it's just, it's semantics.
He's supposed to be an alien worm, so I think you can depict that however you want. But he's literally just like the tiniest, most insignificant creature ever, almost. I mean,
and they do such a good
I don't want to start
parallel
arguing about
of
bacteria.
Whenever the robots first show up on Earth, Captain Marvel can't even scratch them, and that's so funny to me because, like you were saying, he's a little alien worm caterpillar thing, and it's so funny that whenever he finds out who Mr. Mind is, and then it just reveals that it's this little tiny caterpillar, it makes you go back and think, wow, like that. I can't believe that's all he is. It's really shocking.
Right.
It's a really shocking reveal.
Well, I think that speaks to a lot. Like I really like that because that's as I was saying, the way Jeff Smith does it in this book. It's a beautiful visual metaphor that you might not necessarily think about, but it's like subtext that your brain is absorbing just by seeing the art. Billy is little, and all of his villains are little, but Billy is like this noble. Like I said, he's got a hero's heart. So when he turns into Captain America, he's
Captain
huge.
Marvel.
Or Captain America. When he turns into Captain Marvel, he's a big guy. He's the big superhero, and all of his villains are just like small and ugly and hate-filled and proud of being small and ugly and evil, but they're always constantly trying to overcompensate for their lack of height. Mr. Mind is building giant robots.
Yeah. What's great, too, is with the overcompensation of all the villains, as it shows throughout this book, Billy is not afraid of a single thing. He does not even let his size do a thing. He'll rush in head on. And he even did that before he became Captain Marvel, which is amazing.
As a kid, he's a hero. Whereas Dr. Sivana is a coward. He's always making sure he has the upper hand. He uses a gun. He's bossing around, henchmen to do all his work for him. And the same thing with Mr. Mind. He is proud of the fact that he can control other people to do things for him, creates giant robots, is constantly talking about how great and powerful he is.
Right.
Like these are negative traits that we don't like in people. We don't like when people are arrogant or when they're mean, obviously, or overcompensating. But we like when people are proud and noble and heroic, like Billy is. So it's a really, really great visual summation of the core intrinsic characteristics.
I love that Mary and Billy are already acting like a brother and sister 20 minutes after meeting each other. Like, they didn't waste any time to start kind of bonding. Like, Mary was like, "Yuck, I kissed you." Like, typical little sister things, And I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah.
And when she says, "That's even worse. Change back into Captain Marvel and take me flying." It's like, she's just being such a little sister. And I love it so much.
Jeff nails the little kid dialogue and, the little kid interactions. I don't know if...
They seem so believable.
Yeah, I don't know if Jeff had brothers or sisters, but I did. And I can tell you that certainly is exactly how I acted with my brothers. Just that constantly back and forth at each other.
And that's great. I love that dynamic is already existing. They didn't have this awkward transition phase between the time.
Yeah.
It's just they hopped right into being brother and sister. Jeff Smith realized there was no point.
Yeah, the story really moves along at a good pace. And again, it works because again, the theme of family. These are characters who are both really independent, and on the outside they're happy to prove how independent they are, but obviously they both want a family. And so they fall into their family really quickly because that's what they really want.
Right. And then he starts having you start to relate to Mary about how she has no home and how she was an orphan. So, just like the situation that Billy was in. Right. And he does such a good job of making us feel for the character because we've already experienced the situation once before. So when it introduces itself as in Mary's situation, it's like, oh man, again? You feel so bad for this situation. And then obviously it was a really nice panel. This was just a little nice touch that I loved. How she's sitting on the dock by herself. Oh. And Billy comes up to try to talk to her. She pulls her hood over her
That was really good. I did really like that.
And she just doesn't want to talk.
Tries to close herself off.
Yeah, and, it's just showing the whole, they're both, like you said, they're both trying to be independent, and they both want to show that they're independent, and then they're both hugging each other at the very end. It melted my heart. I loved it so much. And then, then I start to get a sense of danger whenever the second robot shows up. It kind of kicks me back into reality and makes me realize, oh, wait, there's another narrative going on here. He pulled me into this brother-sister dynamic so quickly and so suddenly, and then the second robot shows up, and I think, oh man, I completely forgot about that. That's a problem. And then this scared me to death. That when he transformed into Captain Marvel again and hit Mary with the lightning, I audibly went, oh no. I'm thinking, oh my god, he just introduced her. There's no way he's already taking her out of the story. There's no way. I couldn't believe it.
Now, when you read this for the first time, were you aware of the character of Mary Marvel? Did you know she becomes a superhero? Okay.
No, I did not. I knew that there was the Marvel family. I knew that there was, a little Miss Marvel, I guess.
Mary Marvel, that's her name.
Yeah, and I didn't piece it together that this was her. I thought it was Billy's little sister. I didn't think anything of it. So, me seeing this, I'm blown away that he goes over to the car and there she is, Captain Marveled out.
Yeah.
I love that so much. I feel like the way he did Mary Marvel in this story and the way he did Billy Batson and Captain Marvel in this story appeals to both audiences of Captain Marvel fans. Mary Marvel is the Captain Marvel I like, where it's the little kid in control of the superpowers, Captain Marvel, and Billy Batson is the two separate characters.
Which is the one that I like.
Right, and I feel like Jeff Smith did such a great job of hitting both audiences here with these two. And she's still just acting like a little sister throughout this, and even with superpowers, she flies into the ground and hits off the ground
bouncing
and
around.
bounces,
Yeah.
and, wow, did you see me? I'm coming in for a landing. Look out! And I just, even in this situation, even when it's not Billy, Captain Marvel is just, trying to be protective of Mary Marvel and being this father figure like we've talked about earlier. And I just love that so much. It's such a roller coaster of emotions for me, not knowing what it is, And like I was saying, it hits both audiences. I love that. A nice little attention to detail later. The rest of what's happening is just stuff. A nice attention to detail later is when he goes to try to talk to the reporter in the office building, and she's like, "Kid, we don't have time for this. Go leave." And he's like, "Wait, I got an idea." Comes back in as Captain Marvel, and she's
all fawning over him. Yeah,
right.
He's a big
and
hunk.
That's the foreshadowing to them teaming up at the end of the book, or them becoming a partnership at the end of the book. Then I forgot to mention this is right before that they introduce Savannah as a sub-villain thing. And, earlier, how we were saying he kind of has the short man syndrome thing. He's got these two big, beefy bodyguards with him that come to kidnap two little kids, It's like, okay, I see that he's kind of scummier than they let on originally. The last couple things that I've got...
while we're still talking about Savannah, what do you think about Savannah being the head of Homeland Security? That's one thing that was a significant change, I think, to the story. Dr. Savannah traditionally was just another evil scientist. He built robots and monsters, and he had evil plots to, eliminate all the radio waves so nobody could talk to each other on phones and walkie-talkies and whatnot. But in Jeff Smith's book, he presents the character as a powerful government figure. He's literally like the top of the police force, the head of Homeland Security. I believe in the book, I think it's called Heartland Security.
It is Heartland Security, and they even make a note of it earlier or later, whenever they're trying to get around the robots coming down. And they say, sorry, sir, I can't get through. And he says, I'm the head of Heartland Security. I can do whatever I want.
So
it gives him this, this God complex.
Well, it's the ultimate, short man syndrome, because he's this little guy who's in a position with the most authority, and he's not afraid to use it, even to kidnap kids. To kidnap and threaten to kill kids.
Yeah, and it made him feel much more impactful, especially in this situation, because obviously he can't do anything to Captain Marvel and Mary Marvel, but he's done his research. Whenever he kidnaps the kids, cover their mouths so they can't say the magic words. It's showing that he is smart.
That's actually again, that's a nice kind of a nod. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure. I don't know if Jeff Smith intentionally did it like this, or just because it's just easier to do it this way. But Dr. Savannah in the original comics figured out Captain Marvel's identity really, really early on in the series. After his fourth appearance, he figured out that Captain Marvel was Billy Batson, and so so most of his appearances, he knows everything about Captain Marvel, and so that they kind of Jeff Smith just gets that into the character right away. He's an evil genius. He figures out what's going on, and that's what makes him threatening. Because he's in a position of power, and he's got the information.
I feel like this iteration of Savannah is leaning a little bit more towards a Lex Luthor archetype character. The calculating genius who knows he can't fight the superhero character. And I've never seen Savannah other than this book, but as you're talking about him being the scientist that wants to cut off the radio waves and so on and so forth, I feel me being very, very partial to Lex Luthor. seeing this, loved it. It instantly reminded me of Luthor, like of doing things behind the scenes to make sure that his way is the way that's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely falls into that archetype. You know, the superhero is big and strong, and the supervillain is smart and evil.
Right.
But I think, like, whereas, again, this just kind of like goes into the differences of the properties. If we're going to compare Sivana to Lex Luthor, whereas Lex Luthor is suave and cunning, and that's what makes him so powerful. Whereas, and intimidating. He's intimidating. And Sivana is like cretinous. You know, he's small and nobody seems to like him. Like even his henchmen, like, you know, he's the only reason people do what he says is because he's just in charge. Powerful. Yeah. So he's I think they do a good job of not just making him a Lex Luthor. Like he's a really good mirror. He's a mirror of Billy Batson, not a mirror of Captain Marvel. Whereas Lex Luthor is a mirror of Superman. Dr. Sivana is a mirror of Billy. Whereas, you know, Billy is small but pure, innocent, noble, and brave. Sivana is small, cretinous, cowardly, and selfish, and greedy, and treacherous. Yeah.
Just any noun, any
negative noun applies to Sivana. Yes.
Yeah. I loved the thing that I loved so much. You know, the rest of what's happening is just typical escalation to climax scenes. You know, showing the pressure on when Billy gets inside the foot of the robot and all the insects start overtaking him. They say, "Crush, crush, crush the human." One cockroach comes up and says, "Wait, why wait? This human once spared my life. We should spare his." I laughed endlessly at this scene. That all these bugs,
they start arguing.
You know, they noted, they foreshadowed it earlier. How when Billy's in his house with Mary, he goes, "Wait, all the bugs are gone. Normally, when I turn the light on, all of these
cockroaches scatter.
All these cockroaches just scattered." And with the ant scene, when he's on the scene of the report on the robots, how he sees all the ants going one direction, and you know the ants in this scene are saying, "The ants of the 5 great colonies were attacked as we marched to answer the call. We were attacked by the boot."
Yes.
Yeah, and it's such a little humorous side note because obviously there's a lot happening right now. There's a lot of pressure on.
There's this.
Billy's trying to save the day.
I just love that there's this whole little like insect world where they have like this mythology, this legend of the boot, and you know, and they recognize Billy as the one who saved them from the boot.
Right, and it's like, okay, this is funny, and it's like fun. It's showing that even though Billy was, this is, I feel like the last staple to Billy being a heroic child, having the heart of a hero, of that his heroics and the size of his enormous heroic heart are noticed in every penis.
Like, in every way.
Whether it be people, whether it be these animals or these insects, you know, so on and so forth. That's just so great, and it's such a testament to how much of a hero. Yeah,
well, because he's a hero on every level, big and small. You know, he doesn't kill bugs.
The small thing, the paralleling small thing as well. Like Billy is small and he feels small, but even things smaller than him look at him as a hero, kind of thing. And I love that. I love the confrontation at the top of the robots as it continues to escalate, and Sivana's on top of the robot. Mr. Mind is saying, you know, I've got both the Marvel children, you know, I don't need anything else, so on and so forth. It feels so powerful. It's such a good climax. And then when he finally saves the day, he starts feeling like a hero, and that's great. And I love it. I love it so much. And the last hilarious scene in the book that I felt is when Sivana is trying to shoot Billy, and Mary Marvel jumps in the way and goes, "Whew, I am bulletproof." Yes. That was such a nice callback. And and she just slaps the gun out of his hand and slaps him in the face.
Smack.
And it's just kind of showing how insignificant Sivana is when he doesn't have power behind him. He's getting beat up by a little girl. quote unquote. You know, she's obviously superpowered, but you know. And then the last couple things too. We're at the end of the book now. How they're all talking to the wizard back at the Rock of Eternity, and you know the wizard starts acting like a grandfather figure to both of the children. You know, Captain Marvel's obviously talking to him like very respectful, very very, very mentoring, like so on and so forth. And the wizard, Billy Batson, you'd better return it straight away. Like it just feels so grandfatherly and so elderly, and it's such a nice end. And the last panel of the book is almost as impactful as the cover for me. The Billy and Mary are both looking out the window over the skyline of the town that they're in, and you know she's saying everything's going to be all right, so on and so forth. And there's all the other characters in the reflection of the window. Was just a very, very nice bow on the end of the.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was the ultimate ending. Again, this whole theme of family and togetherness. The story starts off.
Just all
Billy is an orphan by himself, and the final page, you know, he's got a family. So. Yeah,
that it melted my heart because you know earlier he was saying don't need a family, yada blah blah blah. He's trying to be independent, and like you can just see the genuine joy on his face now that he has a family and he just doesn't have to worry about how he's going to eat anymore. You know, it's a nice, like you were saying, it's the perfect ending. So that's the end of the book.
Yeah, it's really good. I think what makes this book, Jeff Smith's Shazam, The Monster Society of Evil, I think what makes it a true masterpiece, and I do think it's a masterpiece, is Jeff Smith does such a great job of cherry picking all of these cool ideas and scenes and events from all the old comics and kind of presenting them in a not just his style, but like in an updated modern narrative. So in much the same way that Batman, the animated series, kind of took all the cool stuff from Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams' Batman comics from the 70s and kind of like presented it to a new generation in like a newer style, or the same way that Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely's All-Star Superman cherry-picked all these broad ideas from 70s Superman comics and presented it in like a modern narrative. Jeff Smith does the same thing. Like he basically just takes all the wonderful things from the old comics, from the 1940s, and really does a great job of just bringing it all together. Bringing it all together into a modern story. And to me, it's obviously it's a great love letter to the old C.C. Beck Captain Marvel comics, but at the same time, it's more than just an homage. Like it really, I think it breathed new life into the character. It presents the character in a way that I don't think anybody else really tried to epitomize the character. This book is the epitome of the character. Like
it really is. Like it's got that childlike innocence in the art and the writing, like the little subtle humor, the little jokes, so on and so forth. It takes itself seriously in such a different way than other comics take themselves seriously. Like Jeff Smith knew that he didn't need to turn Captain Marvel into something that he's not. He knew that there was things there that he could just capitalize on.
Well, he takes the material seriously. That's what I mean. He takes the material seriously in understanding that you can have a fun, goofy, magical story with kids and monsters, which is obviously like Jeff Smith's style. That's what Bone is.
Oh, of course.
But I think he proves that you can do Captain Marvel like that. And I don't think anybody has really tried to fully embrace Captain Marvel in this style, maybe other than the Batman Brave and the Bold cartoon.
And that can just come back into, that's kind of how the
exactly. The
cartoon
cartoon is
general.
specifically doing homages to the Golden Age and Silver Age comics. So,
and Captain Marvel fits in.
oh
that
yeah, he
universe
fits
of
perfectly.
a modernized campy Batman. It's a modernized Adam West Batman, or not even necessarily Adam West, just the same vein as the Adam West Batman. Real campy, real fun. And then he fits in that universe. Like that Shazam feels pretty out of this book. Like, it just feels like the Brave and the Bold guys said, "Hey, let's use the Jeff Smith Captain Marvel for our comic or for our show."
Well, and the reason for that is because both Jeff Smith and the Brave and the Bold guys are both saying, "Let's do the CC Beck Captain Marvel for our show or for our comic." So they're both taking from the same source material, and I really wish DC would do more with this. They actually did a kind of a sequel to Jeff Smith's Shazam book called Billy Batson and the Magic of Shazam, and that was it was written and drawn by Mike Kunkel, who has an all ages comic called Hero Bear. This was a pretty short-lived series, if I recall. It was part of DC at the time. They were doing a thing called Johnny DC, which was specifically their kids-oriented comics. Like they had, I think they were doing Tiny Titans, and they had some other books, but they were specifically these comics are for kids comics. So they were never really that popular because kids don't want to read things that are specifically said they're for kids.
Right, because they just feel kind of, not offended, but, kind of offended. They just, they want to feel grown up.
Yeah, I always say, like, the thing with kids is that kids always want what the adults are having.
Yeah.
So that's the magic of, like, a Jeff Smith who can take something,
make you want what kids.
Yeah, he can. Well, not just that, but he can take something that is like for kids, but it never feels like it's talking down to kids or pandering to kids. Like it's really mature. It's mature storytelling. It's mature comic art, but it's accessible to anybody of all age.
Right.
And I don't mean to sound like I'm talking down Mike Kunkel's series. I haven't read it. I really don't know anything about it.
Except that
it exists. Yeah. I like his art style. I think he's a good fit for Captain Marvel. But anyway, so
this would be the perfect comic when someone says, "Hey, I really want to like Captain Marvel."
This is the book I would give them.
This is the book I would recommend them in a heartbeat. Like with Superman, the first book I would recommend is All-Star Superman. I've done it already.
Yes.
And with Captain Marvel, I've had multiple friends say, "Hey, I like Captain Marvel. What, I don't know much about him though. What should I read?" Because most everyone else's exposure is also things that DC has put him in to keep him around. So I always say this. Once I've read this, this is my first go-to. Read this. Read this book. You will love him.
Like I said, it's a perfect match of style, tone, character, everything about it. It all works. It works on every level. Well, and it's a book that's so unlike the majority of books that DC publishes.
Especially now.
Well, especially now. This book did come out before all of their new 52 stuff, but even then, like this is not in any sort of way like the DC house style, and I understand that it has its fans, and that's fine. But it is just so nice to see DC kind of
embrace this.
Embrace that their characters come from this.
And that they know that there's still an audience that wants to see this.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, obviously Jeff Smith is a huge fan of Captain Marvel. That's why he wanted to do the book.
You can tell.
Yeah. So that does it for the first episode of Comic DNA. On the next episode, we'll be reading Miracle Man, Book 1 by Alan Moore and Gary Leach. You can always keep up with everything that we're doing at newhavencomics.com. That's where we will be posting new information about the podcast until we can figure out exactly what we're going to be doing with this thing. And we will also be producing a list of future books that we'll be doing, so you'll be able to keep up and read ahead if you're so inclined. So, thanks a lot for listening, and we'll see you all next time.